Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with Ronan Burke. Ronan is a CEO and co-founder at Inscribe, which is a leading fintech solution for fraud detection and risk management. Ronan was listed in the Forbes 30 under 30 list, and he made some big splashes in the fintech space. So I believe our listeners will be able to learn more about the future of fraud detection in fintech. So Ronan, thank you for coming to our interview today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So Ronan, could you perhaps tell us a short story about yourself, what brought you to your current role and what you guys up to these days?
Sure. So yeah, just as a very brief introduction, I'm Ronan, CEO and co-founder of Inscribe. And at Inscribe, we're helping fintechs approve more customers and reduce fraud by automating their account opening and underwriting workflows. In particular with fraud detection and automation features. And so yeah, going back to the early days, I grew up in Ireland. My first exposure to Silicon Valley was actually a poster of Palo Alto and the Mountain View area with companies like HP, Intel, and Sun Microsystems, and companies like these dotted around them. And I think I was about 10 then, and from then I was always intrigued by technology and just what was happening out here in Silicon Valley. And as I grew up, I just kind of converged closer and closer to that. And in university, I studied electrical and electronic engineering. And yeah, during university, myself and my co-founder, who's also my twin, we had, various different side projects, and we were, always exploring technology. And after university, then we decided, that we're going to spend some time working on a couple of projects, regardless of their commercial viability. So just explore and see what happens. And yeah, that's how we, ended up in the opportunity of, working on a startup. And just to explain how we ultimately found what we're working on now, it was actually our experience with financial services, products and services. So when we were applying for current accounts with a local bank in Ireland, it was just an unusually painful experience. So we were providing documents, going into retail branches in person, waiting weeks for a response. And then, if you had to change an address, it was almost impossible. And then similarly, when we first started visiting the US, we applied for a credit card, but we were rejected. Granted, that took 4 weeks to even learn about that rejection. So the process with financial services just seemed very broken. And we just grew suspicious of what was going on behind the scenes. A lot of these products have good front-end applications, but what's going on in their back office and in their risk and operations teams is usually, much less advanced. And then we thought then, we began speaking to founders in the fintechs, thinking that the fintechs had everything figured out, in contrast to the larger institutions, but they actually also had a similar problem too. And we learned that they were delivering a very good and improved user experience on the front end, but behind the scenes, their risk and operations teams are actually also quite manual, and there just wasn't very good software being built for these folks. And that's where we landed on the opportunity for Inscribe for building good software for risk management teams in financial services companies.
Fantastic. So how long have you been working on this project, or your company? How long had it been in life? Yeah,
so we're in June of this year, it'll be the 5-year anniversary of when we initially started working on iterations of Inscribe. So yeah, we've been around for a few years now and working with many leading fintechs and financial institutions.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I know that the problem is very serious, and when I have a list of these fintech companies that work on the fraud detection and KYC, there are a lot of hundreds of them. So how do you distinguish yourself from other companies like yours?
Yeah, so what we actually noticed in the industry was that, with account opening and underwriting, you have various different things you want to learn about a person. You want to know who they are, where they live, how much they earn, what businesses they're associated with, how much assets they have, if it's a business, how much revenue they have. And a lot of these questions are the questions that financial services companies ask in order to understand the risk profile of a customer before onboarding them. And what we found is that a large part of the existing solutions fell into the understanding who the person was question, which is the identity, or the name and the SSN, and the identity portion of it. But we actually found that verifying information such as where this person lives or how much they earn and what assets they have, that's actually still a very manual and slightly broken process. And that's where Inscribe primarily focuses is on these, everything except the name and SSN and identity of the person. We're focusing on like the very interesting questions, like where this person lives, how much they earn, what businesses they're associated with. They're the type of questions which we seek to answer with our product, whereas a lot of the existing incumbent solutions have more of a focus on the identity portion of the KYC and underwriting equation.
Mm-hmm. So what are the typical use cases of your customers? Is this banking organizations, opening new accounts, or perhaps other cases?
Yeah, so our customers span a wide array of financial services companies, but in particular, we work a lot with business lenders, personal loans, credit cards, crypto payments, companies like these. And in particular, there's two use cases within these companies. So the first use case is account opening. So this is where you just want to get information about the customer to understand if they're appropriate to be onboarded onto the platform, and also to comply with KYC and KYB regulations. And then for certain customers, like a business lender or personal lender, they need to onboard the customer, but also understand their creditworthiness and their risk profile for providing them with some credit and loans. And this is our second use case of underwriting. And there are two primary use cases for now. And yeah, we work with businesses and customers of varying different sizes within that. Couple of hundred early stage fintechs all the way up to large enterprises.
Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit what's something you or your team have recently achieved that you are really proud of?
Yeah, so I think for us as a team, the thing we're most proud of is the extent of the fraud that we're catching every month right now. So our latest calculations put our fraud detection rate on a monthly basis at $18 million. I'm quite confident it's above that right now, but our most recent check was about $80 million. And that's for the customers that we're working with today. But this number will be increasing rapidly as well. And we're extremely proud of this because a lot of this is actually net new fraud that existing solutions doesn't actually effectively detect. And so the reality is, as you kind of alluded to earlier, is that there are many fraud solutions out there and KYC, KYB solutions, and they do detect fraud. But by the sheer existence of risk and operations teams still being quite large, that's a sign that there's still a lot of fraud that isn't detected, or just risky customers still getting through. And yeah, we're providing a lot of net new uplift in terms of new fraud caught. And for us, I think this is a win for the whole industry in that we're coming at this problem from a relatively new vector by detecting fraud in data points such as documents. And this is providing an uplift for the entire industry.
Fantastic. So yeah, we have a lot of news stories about famous fraud stories, like we have recently Elizabeth Holmes, Adam Rogas, and others. So I wonder, I have a question. If someone who is listening to this interview would like to take one or two major takeaways from what you propose in your solution, what would it be?
Yeah, well, one of the big things I'm a big believer in is that as companies move more and more towards automation and using technology throughout their business, I think one important factor to be sure to consider is actually risk and fraud detection within those processes. So we have an internal line at Inscribe that automation without risk management is reckless. And so we always like putting the risk management process very close to automation. And as fintechs get more and more eager to get towards automation, this is going to become more and more important. We can't take humans out of the loop completely in these fraud checks. And so there is like a balance of using equivalent technology that can exceed human performance, and that kind of human touch can be replicated with machine learning. But it's important to just make sure that those tech solutions on the fraud detection side are also implemented alongside these automation platforms that are kind of widely known. And I think that's the next wave. And yeah, I'd also think as well, a second takeaway would be utilizing best-in-class solutions. There's a lot of good vendors out there that are providing very good solutions, and I think building internally for a lot of these companies can be quite a big investment, and it's also like building the first version of these systems, but also maintaining it thereafter. That's quite a large investment, and so I'd also encourage folks to consider buying off the shelf instead of building internally. There's a ton of ROI here, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would like to hear your personal opinion, because you're working in this space. You've been working for a long time. And what is a commonly held belief or major misconception that you strongly disagree with the concept of fraud and fintech?
Yeah, I think a big one for me is actually, I think fraud and risk management should be more of a top priority for more companies. And so what we usually see is that a top priority for a fintech or any kind of business is growth. So to grow as fast as possible, bring as much new revenue in the door, new customers in the door. And then second to that is efficiency. And then third to this is usually compliance. And then fourth is fraud and risk. But I actually, and like these things can be, at odds with each other. And so if you want to grow very fast, that sometimes mean you're leaving in, more fraudsters. However, I think one thing I disagree with this is that I think a better balance can be achieved. And I think this comes from just talking and raising the awareness of tactics that can be used to balance out fraud and also compliance issues as well. Oftentimes it can be left as secondary considerations, but I think they should be primary considerations.
Fantastic. So because this is very important topic of risk management, would you like to share some major trends that you see will come in the coming years, for example, that people maybe are not aware this time in this specific sector?
Yeah, so I think one thing which is in the fraud detection industry, there's like 3 categories of fraud. You have first party fraud, second party fraud, third party fraud. Like first party fraud is where a person, provides their own information, but in a misleading fashion to get, more favorable terms. So for example, exaggerating income or, saying you live somewhere you don't live. And then second party fraud is where somebody gives their own information to somebody else to commit fraud. And then third party fraud is where somebody steals information from somebody else and uses it as if it's their own. And on this regard, I think third party fraud is it's already big, but I think it's getting bigger, in particular the cases where completely synthetic identities are being generated and complemented with real data. And so when you're trying to commit fraud, you don't need to steal somebody's name, address, income, and all the information about them. You can actually just steal one piece of that identity, such as their address, and then you can complement that address with kind of synthetic or completely made up data. And the reason why you can do that is because a lot of companies don't have good checks for things like how much this person earns or how much this business earns. That's a very difficult data point to verify. And so a lot of companies, if the identity roughly seems mostly correct, they can complement it with these other checks. And that's just very difficult to detect. And so I think synthetic identities with completely falsified information combined with some real data is a super difficult problem to detect. And I think, that's going to wreak a lot of havoc in fintech and financial services over the next few years as companies try to grapple with that increasing problem.
I remember there was a movie from fraudster that was a pilot. I forgot the name. Famous movie, and it was Leonardo DiCaprio.
Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah, Catch Me If You Can. So now you're on the next phase of this solving of this problem, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, I'm asking this question all of my guests because I'm running a global risk community. We're a community about 30,000 members, and as a community, we want to know how we can better, as a community, contribute to better understanding of this complex world of risk. So what would you suggest?
Yeah, I think for me, it's I think there's a ton of value from collaboration across companies, and this can be like sharing best practices, but also just actually like even getting to the point of collaborating on data. And so there are systems out there which share data between like known fraudulent actors and known fraudulent patterns, and this type of collaboration is extremely powerful. And so I think collaboration as one point is one that I'd recommend. Also as well, I think nurturing a culture of fraud and risk being considered in company conversations. And so instead of just depending who the stakeholders are and what the principles of a certain decision already include, I think adding in a conversation around risk and risk management it's a small thing which can actually go a long way. And so, well, like typical things that would come up in a conversation would be, what's the ROI of this investment? But I also think you can add on questions like, well, what's the risk associated with such a proposal, particularly when it comes to financial services companies and new products that they're launching, and just having these types of conversations more top of mind, and they already are, but extending it more so it's a much more normalized conversation across the whole company and not necessarily just within risk management teams. A lot of fintechs are also having product managers and engineers work on these types of problems for the first, and they might not have backgrounds in risk management. And so making sure that non-risk management professionals can contribute to these conversations is also very valuable too.
Fantastic. So good, many good tips. So that were all my questions. Maybe if I missed something, would you like to add something to our audience?
Yeah, I think as an overall, I think I'd just like to comment how great of a community the risk management community is. I love seeing how it's growing every year, and the role of a risk management professional and risk operations teams is getting more and more popular. And I think there's a whole ecosystem that's evolving around this in terms of vendors and various different groups and events and conferences. And so yeah, I'm very excited to contribute to this particular group, and yeah, looking forward to listening to more of your podcasts and contributing where I can.
Thank you, Ronan, very much for your insightful interview, and I wish your company great success and have a good growth in this coming years, and hopefully we can catch up in a few months and speak again on some specific topic.
Would love to. Thanks for having me, Boris. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye bye.